Good morning.
Yes, correct.
Hey.
I'm like literally in the middle of a house move, so I might leave halfway through this. I'll see. There's a piano that needs to be moved. Although I built it, do you know what a dolly is? Like a thing with wheels that you can put a piano on. I built one of those. I'm very proud of myself. So hopefully if you hear it break, or if it breaks, then I'll be less proud, but hopefully it'll hold the weight.
Awesome. So we're all here. So we don't have anything in the agenda, but what would be useful to spend this time on? So I know we haven't had a lot of chance this week to progress on things with registry and incidents, but we've still got a bunch of time together. So what would be a useful way to use this time?
I have an open question kind of directed at Andrew, but I don't know if that's a wise choice of using this time.
I mean, it depends on the question, but yes, probably is the answer.
Okay, well, so there's been an issue that's been sitting in my to-do list for the last 9 years related to metrics and trying to sort out the metrics specific for node pools. I sense that we don't have a really good method of validating saturation of node pools, making sure we have enough nodes in a node pool available, etc. And I would like to be able to figure that out because at some point, we're going to run into problems with this as we expand our Kubernetes work. And right now, this is difficult for the on-call. And Andrew, I know you've suggested creating a service in our service catalog for Kubernetes. I'm wondering if we should do the same for node pools. Like, should every individual node pool become a service in our service catalog? Sounds a little weird.
No, I think that the service should be Kubernetes and node pools are in the Kubernetes service. And each node pool is what we call a shard.
Okay.
And so we've got that shard label that we already aggregate things over. So we might have like from a, I mean, we've got to think it through. The saturation. So saturation is pretty straightforward. We can have things like, how much of the node pool is, or how many nodes, the maximum that we can expand to is. And then if we stuck up there, we can treat that as a normal saturation metric. We can treat, I don't know, there's like a whole, even CPU on node pools, we can, if we find that there's nodes in the node pool that are pinned at 100% all of the time, that's probably something that we treat in the same way as, if web hosts are pinned at 100% CPU. So we've got a lot of that infrastructure in place, and we can just apply it to the Kubernetes service with each node pool being a different shard. I'm like really happy to help work with you on that. There's also another
excellent.
Yeah, there's another part of it that I think is really important and came out in the incidents we've been having, and that's that we've got these nice graphs now that show us and in fact several different types of incidents where we've seen the problems with the crash back-off loop, and the other one during, with the OOM killer destroying GitLab shell during that incident. And as far as I know, if we got alerts, they were to like hash alerts, which is like not getting alerts. So we need to have those as proper alerts, and we've got them attributed to the service that they are part of now. And so we should be sending out like page duties, if we have serious back-off loops, not just like one happening here or there, but like, proper spikes, then we should get notified about that properly. And we can, direct people to those new pages that we've got.
Okay.
But that's slightly separate from what you were talking about.
Yeah, but it's all in the same realm. And my primary concern here is that, we've recently lost Ben and we're soon to lose Craig. And those are two
Yeah.
primary people I would go to rely on helping me with metric data. So, and I know you're a horrendously busy person, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
Yeah. I think
with the
it's
desire,
really important, and it's a really good thing for us to be spending our time doing, because you know, at the moment there's a lot of that stuff. There's several things. We actually have a lot of the old alerts that are just going to hash alerts, and we actually need to tidy those up. And then, but if we attributed them to like the service and all of that, then I think it would be much tidier anyway. And we kind of, we need to do that like soon. Like there's also the work about, remember the HPA scaling. What's the state of that?
that was the last of all the merge requests was just merged into place, and I got our chart upgraded. Now it's just a matter of making or getting all the labels applied to everything. So that's the next thing on my task list to do with that.
Awesome.
So hopefully when I complete that, that unblocks you from being able to do all the saturation work for the HPAs and whatever other Kubernetes objects we want to apply that to.
Yeah.
The one thing that I will continue to find missing is creating a saturation metric on EmptyDir space, because it doesn't look like Kubernetes exposes disk usage on an EmptyDir at all, which is unfortunate because now we don't know if, say, the project exports are going to use up too much disk, or when we migrate the API, since currently we're writing data to disk and we probably need to create an EmptyDir for that. We won't know if we're filling that up at all.
Is that EmptyDir like its own mount on the node?
Yeah.
So we could use like the node exporter metrics.
Yes. But we don't know where that space is going to, because EmptyDir is just like a scratch space for a pod, but that node could be running any number of workloads. So we don't know if it's
which one it is.
Like we could assume safely, because we limit how our workloads operate anyways per node pool anyways. But it just, if we ever get to a point where we start to remove our node pools and try to consolidate things in a more effective manner, that will become a little more difficult to monitor. But I see that being much further down the road. So
is there something that we can, like a change that we can contribute upstream to some Kubernetes C advisor?
We could always try to.
Yeah, but it is kind of tangential. It's not like at the core, you know, we're not changing like the scheduling algorithm here. We're adding like,
precisely,
you know, it's not the core of the system, and it does seem like a reasonable thing to do. Because like you say, like, especially if we have like 1,000 nodes and they're all kind of, you know, they're all the same. And it's like, oh, this volume's full. That won't be nice.
Yeah, like we've got safety mechanisms in place where if an EmptyDir gets too full, we'll kill the pod, but that doesn't stop someone from setting up an EmptyDir of 5 terabytes and the physical node only contains 4 terabytes of disk space, for example. So they could run the node out of space and Kubernetes is not going to do anything about it potentially. But actually, I would hope in that particular situation, you can't schedule a node, since that would technically run out of disk space, or you're allocating too much disk space. But
is there some sort of overcommit with disk space in the same way there is?
I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure about that.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt, but I think we're like about to see a big incident here. Sidekick is, I just noticed my MRs are not getting updated, and Sidekick AppDex like
Igor is
Igor's just asked someone.
Yeah, maybe we should hop on the incident Zoom, or I'm going to do that.
Cool.
Later, guys.
I'll join you.
Yeah, I'll do the same.
Yeah.
Hold. Before everyone leaves, there are enough people over there. Don't forget that. So only when
chase the ball, Marin.
You want more incidents, Andrew?
No.
We can invite some external consultants to help us with certain parts of the platform. Scarby, before you run away, before everyone runs away, I read that we just got the charts change merged for that was blocking us from continuing with the API migration. Forgot what it was exactly. That's my brain.
There
now.
was a change for the container registry, missing a configuration item that was populating our Rails pods.
Correct.
I did
Does
not
that
know that
unblock
was
us
merged
completely?
yet. It unblocks us from continuation of investigation of various parts. Yes.
Okay. I guess I'll talk about scheduling with Amy.
It's really this week we have not made much progress. We know what the next tasks are, which is testing, deployments, and continuing the readiness review. We haven't progressed much this week because of incidents and registry. But as soon as, well, assuming no more incidents, then next week, Scarbeck and Graham at least will have some capacity there. I'm guessing, Henry, you're still fighting with the database on pre, right? Like getting that connected.
The database is fine, just that we need to solve some issues also with the chart and registry, and then find a plan to, or we need to figure out if registry is working as expected now with API being enabled in pre, that we have observability, and then we can work on a plan to switch over and do the migration as a test together with the registry team. So these are the 3 steps for next week, I would say.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't have too much isolation between people on the work that is happening for registry and API. Like, I know that there needs to be one, right? Like, you need to have focus to actually get the work done. But my main concern is that Henry, you, for example, go too far off in registry and just like API becomes a spec. That sets us up for failure in long term. So I don't know how. So this is for you and me, Amy, to figure out how to actually not let that happen. But I'm concerned.
I feel this is closely related. I mean, at the moment, registry is partly blocked by API work, and so it's not really that far away from each other.
Okay.
It's just that it also takes time to look into registry stuff, for instance, which slows down looking into needed work for API. So it's more work, but it's not too far away, I would say.
Yeah, so the issue, Marin, that you were mentioning that just got merged is also blocking something in the pre-prod because the container registry in Rails is not working properly. So I'll try to get that updated today. I didn't see that was merged until you mentioned it. So I'll be able to get the chart upgraded, which should unblock pre, and then that will also unblock staging. So we could then proceed to start taking traffic on staging as well, theoretically. The other thing on my plate is validating our logging. I've got a merge request ready to go, and that will hopefully allow me to finish up the logging work that has historically been a concern for us. And if that works out well, we could push that to production. And then that's the only blocker I know that's preventing us from going to Canary. So I think with these 2 changes, we're well on our way to making some good progress next week, assuming nothing gets in our way.
Okay. All right.
But I just jinxed it, so.
Trying to, yeah, definitely. Are we going to try, like, how long do you want to have traffic running on staging for before we consider Canary? Like, even if everything went perfectly?
Well, we still have other work that we need to accomplish. So I think we could go to staging, finish up any other validation we need to accomplish. There's a configuration issue I've got open. And then there's just testing to make sure that we're not going to have any awkwardness with deploys and 500 messages when we do a deploy, or pods get ripped out from under us, that kind of thing. But we could go to Canary in parallel with that work. So as long as the logging work is done, which there's one more piece of validation, and then promoting that to production, that's the last thing that's preventing me from spinning up Canary.
Are we going to have traffic running in staging for some days before we do that?
We could certainly do that.
What will traffic running in staging for a few days give us as a data point?
Validation that it works.
How are we validating that? Are we looking for some synthetic
looking
traffic?
For logs, looking for errors.
looking for logs and sentry errors makes sense when there is some traffic happening, right? We don't have much real traffic there. We have actually just parts of automated traffic.
Yeah.
My question is, what kind of data will that provide to us? There's a difference between saying like, okay, we can check it out and collect, I don't know, a couple of hours of data because we know it's automated, predictable traffic, versus saying a couple of days on staging, sitting on staging.
I don't think it's going to provide us any new and exciting information. If anything, it's just validation that the API service is working as it should be with our in tandem with our virtual machines.
Okay, so does that mean
like
that we can
small
parallelize?
percentage on canary
Yeah.
then would probably be better, right? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I think we'll end up taking traffic in staging for at least one day while I complete the logging work. Because I want to make sure I don't break logs in production, so I'm going to more carefully roll that out. So that'll probably be a nice solid day's worth of work and validation prior to doing that. So inherently, due to time constraints, we'll end up seeing traffic and staging for a few days in Kubernetes. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I feel like I was going to ask something and I forgot, so hopefully I'll come back. Oh, no, that's gone. That's a shame. That was probably a good question. We also have a question that we'll need to resolve. Maybe it will be on Monday around the registry. So the other thing about registry work, I think the work is reasonably stop-start. So right now we're kind of unblocking package team, getting pre-set up for them. Then my guess is they'll be busy testing for some weeks maybe before the kind of next round of work. But we do need to also finish making decisions and validating our assumptions on where we deploy the secondary registry instance. So I'm just putting that stuff together, but might actually have the right people here. Like one of the big assumptions we have, one of the big unanswered questions we have is around canary. So right now we have registry that does run in canary. And the question really, I suppose, is do we want to run the setup that we need for the gradual migration, which is a second instance of registry, same version, but configured differently? Do we want to run that configuration in canary as well as on pre-staging and production?
I feel like we talked about this, but I forgot to which conclusion we came when we last
I don't think there was a
talked about this.
conclusion. I think there was
Wasn't.
there are pros and cons both ways. It was definitely an open question. So I think from my side, I think the one of the things I think is going to be interesting is registries under active development. We'll need to make a transition from, there'll be a period of time where we need to make a transition from staging, where we'll be running the 2 instances of registry, to production, where we'll only have the single instance.
So I'm going to say no to Canary and Registry version 2. The reason for this is because we proxy our traffic going to Canary at HA proxy, and that's going to be coming from, or all that traffic is going to go to the first registry before that registry talks to the other registry for its new information. If we wanted to do a canary, we would have to create a new endpoint inside of HA proxy versus the registry just talking to the second registry service. The setup for that is, easy. So it's not difficult to create a canary for that. But I wonder the value we'll get out of that, since that traffic is already being proxied to a different set of servers in the first place. And
How do we make sure that we don't take down registry 1?
Never deploy to it, never make changes.
Solid, we'll do that. So just for those of you who haven't dug through this epic. So this is the current registry setup we have. We run it on our zonal clusters. So each of our 3 zonal clusters is running registry, and it has its own S3 bucket. We need to move to a setup like this, where the existing registry instance will have its S3 bucket. Then there's a secondary version of registry, same version, with a different config that comes with the metadata database. So we've got a couple of options we've been debating here. There's 2 that stand out, and I think the canary is a big question, I think, that determines it. So one is we could run registry 2 in the regional cluster, and the 3 zonal clusters would talk up to the regional cluster. There are pros and cons. The other option is we deploy this registry 2 alongside the registry on each of the 3 zonal clusters. Again, there are pros and cons.
Is the canary registry using a different bucket than the gprod canary? I don't see.
It's all
I don't
configured the
see,
same.
Yeah, because if you just want to do the migration, I don't see a reason why we should do a special thing for canary then, because if it's the same bucket, it's one migration to be done, right? And for gprod, and that we have a second canary there is, I think, more about like I don't see if we get into issues if we deploy the new registry version, right? But it will not help us in confirming that the migration, the long-running migration, will work any better or test it, right? No,
totally agree. I don't think this is about the migration. I think the migration will need to be validated on staging. This will be about will GitLab stay online? So are we potentially deploying? So I think the most risky configuration is where we have staging set up with this, where we have the 2 registry setups. Production will just have the single. So as we're kind of in the testing phase, which means that as we're doing deployments, we lose some validation on staging, right? Because we're running a different configuration. So that feels like the riskiest one to me.
I think
I have a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Alessio.
So I have a question because I'm not really up to speed on this part of the registry migration. So my question here is this double instance registry and registry 2 configuration is, let me rephrase. So we are working on pre, then we move to staging and we run the migration staging. So is there, are we planning to have period of time where we are running these 2 things in canary or production, whatever, but without running the migration? So the question is, can we run this without migrating?
Yes.
And see how it behaves? Okay.
I think we'd have to, because one of the things which we haven't fully validated, but my assumption is that we will need to deploy the registry 2 before we can do any of the database work. So the kind of rough order of tasks will be deploy registry 2, add the database, start the migration, I think.
Yeah, but so my question is more about, is this one of those epic migrations when everything can fail and will fail on the day of the migration? Or are we doing something smart, like the system can shadow the online system and just work on a subset of data so that we migrate a subset of data and we can validate on that instead of just hoping that it works on the first time?
No, how it's working is that it's gradually migrating things over to the new registry, the second registry, and all requests to these new repositories on the new registry will be proxied by the old one. So if you would just move, I don't know, one repository over there, like the gitlab.com, something like that, then it would just proxy all requests for this repository over to the new registry, and we could just stay like this for a few days and see how it works, right? And if it breaks, then we just would break this one repository.
Okay,
And then we
so
can
basically,
continue with the migration, which will take months to continue to finish.
okay, so every incoming request goes to registry, the original one, check on the second one if it knows about it, so if the migration is completed or not. And if it is, forward the request. If not, the first one will handle it.
Yes.
So how does, so the question now is, we're talking about canary, right? So what happens if we deploy something and we have to shut down the registry too, but the data was already migrated?
It will still exist in registry, it's duplicated.
Yeah, but will they be misaligned? I suppose yes, because if you add a new layer, and so this will be kind of no longer aligned. Okay. And how are we routing to the registry, to the canary registry? Still by path, or there's
Still by path. So this goes to the question I was going to ask, is right now we say, give us the path that you're trying to reach, and we'll send you to Canary if you're part of, the GitLab org group or whatever. I don't know how the registry is going to send traffic to registry 2. And if registry 2 is not going to see the path names, but instead they're going to say, hey, here's a blob, give me that blob, for example, we're not going to be able to route traffic via Canary unless we do like a percentage based type of routing, which I don't think is easily possible inside of HA proxy.
Yeah,
That's
but it's also dangerous.
Yeah.
You may end up having blobs that are, so you may have blobs that is partially in the new state and partially in the old one.
Precisely.
Because unless they completely change, and it's possible, the way registry stores data, basically you have, registry is a database which is path based. So you can ask, tell me the layers for this project. And it would give you a list of layers that are just blob. So then you go on another endpoint, say, don't give me those blobs. And these are shared. And by shared, I mean shared. Like if you have the same layer on GitLab org and same layer or another customer, it's the same data.
Yep.
I think one problem is that if you create a new blob, like upload a new image tag, it will go to the new registry, but not stay in the old one. So that is not duplicated. So
Yes,
so that means that at any point in time, if the second registry goes down, we're hard down.
Yes,
this is not a good migration plan. This can't go on.
That will go on for months. So we are 4 months in a very fragile situation. Nobody likes it, I guess.
No, it's not about nobody liking it. We can't do this. So if I need to go in somewhere and say this, I'll say that. Just tell me where. But
I'll
because this can't, we are talking about 6 to 12 month migration plans. Chances of this not going down are 0.
Yeah, I mean, the old one should always write in his own bucket and have a mirror copy, and if some, and also you should check if, basically you need a completely duplicated system, because if for any reason registry 2 is down and registry 1 serves something, then you have to mark as stale the migration for the project or whatever, because it's no longer in line.
Look, I understand what was said, Amy, that we are going to duplicate the data, right? Like we're going to duplicate the buckets basically, right?
That's right,
But the question here that I guess we don't have answered, maybe it's in the write-up somewhere, is how does the registry 1 make a decision where that request should go? So if it detects that I have migrated, so I'm going to send you to registry 2, what happens if the registry 2 is not there?
Yeah,
that's the base question, right? Yes, the data is duplicated in 2 locations. Does it have some logic that says, I couldn't find registry 2, you know what, I'll serve you from this location?
I believe it does. I'll find you the issue. There's quite a long write-up that goes through all of that and the failure cases. So I think, yes, is my assumption, but I'll find the issue.
I'm also not 100% sure, but I understood that like new things will just be created on the new bucket and not be duplicated in the old ones. That I have in mind, but I'm not fully sure about
Henry,
this. But I
it's
think
quite possible. Yeah, but we need to cover that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know there are a lot of things that mention it, but yeah, I have to say, as I think about it, I'm not sure I have a fully concrete answer. So again, there are two issues that touch on this stuff. So I'll find out the relevant points.
So it's not only that the registry 2 is private, it's also that it can't go down. So it's like, because saying that it's private, right, meaning like users don't get to it directly, implies that it's okay because registry 1 is still there, it's public, right? So you generally get access. But actually what this is saying is registry 2 now becomes a database for registry 1. Like as a whole, registry 2 becomes a whole new set of database. So it's not only the blob storage, right? So the bucket rather, it's also the registry 2 database because it needs to pull from 2 data sources. And if one data source is out, then it can't fall back on GCS bucket as its source.
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be able to. Certainly, there is definitely something that says it's fine for it to go down. I can't recall the full description, but my understanding right now is yes, it's fine for registry 2 to go down. There are some things that will break as a result of that, or some things that will fail, but apparently that's fine. And keeping registry online is the main requirement.
Yeah, maybe it goes.
I need to drop out. Sorry.
It goes in read-only mode because I see this. There is this link between the two. The image that you are sharing right now. There is this link between the two buckets. So maybe it's possible that in case of a write on the bucket 2, the write itself is replicated on bucket 1, and because the bucket itself is the only data source for registry 1, it means that it should be able to serve it unless we change it. The bucket format, which I don't think we are. Mm-hmm. So my assumption here is that the failure scenario is that if something is migrated and registry 2 goes down, that project switch to read-only mode.
That's possible. I'll find there is quite a long write-up that explains all this stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, point this to me as well, because I would love to read it because it's very interesting.
I'll share it. Yeah,
take some time for that because it's really a lot.
There's quite a lot of.
I mean, that's also the good and bad thing about it, because they have written out such detailed plans and several epics that it's great to have all of this. But I guess that not too many people were reviewing this in total because it was just too detailed for somebody not being totally into it. So that's why I think we are a little bit unsure of the details here still.
So just on the kind of coming back to the canary thing, so it sounds like there's some definite risks to us having canary. If we don't have registry running on canary, what do we lose? Like, how risky is this going to be? That changes, like the registry version is going to be under active development. We'll be moving from staging direct into production. We have some tests, but it doesn't have great test coverage. So how much more risk do we have by not having an instance of registry running on canary?
I think there's a few things to keep in mind here. Is one, currently we don't deploy the registry the same way we do GitLab.com. So the canary registry gets deployed at the same time the other registries in production get deployed to. We don't leverage canary in a baking period for the registry.
Okay, that's really significant. Okay, great. Because one of the big kind of how do we architect this thing, like registry adds complexity. So if we're not actually using canary right now for a canary instance, then that makes
it's used, like traffic goes to it, but it's just not deployed with the same mechanism.
Right, it's not going to catch a bug in the next version.
Precisely.
Right.
Precisely.
Fine. Okay, that makes sense.
But we could, right, Scarbeck?
We should. Yes.
Yeah. But in a sense that we have 3 configuration file, 1 per environment, and so we may change just the canary one. Is that this? Maybe we are not doing this, but is absolutely
like we
possible.
should. Like
Okay.
historically, we wanted to try to figure out a way to deploy our components using that precise method, similar to GitLab.com. But that got sidetracked, and then now we've got this migration occurring. So at this point,
Okay.
we could either put a pause on this and try to figure out how we want to deploy appropriately. That way we could leverage Canary appropriately, which is going to take some time and effort and a lot of mucking with our CI pipelines to make it work as we desire. Or we could keep the registry migration unblocked. So I think Canary is important, but we also need to understand the traffic and how that's going from registry 1 to registry 2. If it's going to registry 2 and we don't have any sort of sense as to like the project paths that we use currently to segregate our Canary traffic, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
We'd have to visit that in some other fashion if we want to do Canary for registry 2.
I have also another question, which is when we talk about registry and registry 2, we are talking about the same software with a different configuration, right?
Yes,
So it's not
correct.
just the old version and the new version, because
The
also
exact
the old
same
version
version of
needs
the
to proxy
binary.
things, so it will be upgraded. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
going
this
back
is
to
why I think this is why we were pushing so hard for QA. That way we could test things in staging, because we don't currently leverage Canary appropriately. So we don't have a good way of catching errors before they get rolled into production. So,
Okay.
and I think that's a wise choice. Like we really
Yeah.
need to have QA running, but
Yeah.
so
I don't
going
think
back to Amy question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to say, I don't think we should add extra complexity to this migration by changing the way Canary is, right? I think if we're not using Canary right now for registry deployments, that we shouldn't try and test this stuff on Canary. But yeah, we should be well aware that that's a risk that we should cover on staging.
I want to say something, which is, so your question about are we risking to blow up production with this is actually a true risk, because here we are discussing about two things, but indeed there are three things. One is registry configured as a proxy, fallback and proxy, registry configured as new version, and registry configured as standalone. Now, we run standalone in production. We will run both versions in staging.
Yes.
We are not sure what we want to run in Canary, but still, production may be the only one running the third configuration, which means a bug in that configuration will not show up until production deployment.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the bit that I'm most concerned about. That's the riskiest stage, I think. Now, I guess a couple of things we could do, right? So for that is we haven't discussed, and it maybe is an option, is getting staging running with the two registries and then moving that through to production, and then getting staging running with the database and then moving that through to production. So doing a much more incremental, rather than getting staging set up with two instances and a database and a migration before we go to production, we actually break this down further. And that could de-risk it, right? Because I don't think having two, it would be nice to see like two instances in production, be confident. There's no traffic going to that. We could test that out, turn it off safely, and then have the other pieces come in. The other big question around this whole thing, I'm putting together an issue which covers this all off. And the in-depth issue which talks about this, how the proxying works, will probably answer some of this, but we've got an assumption that we're not going to massively increase network traffic. Now, if we have we'll have these three registry instances running on the three zonal clusters, and we'll have registry 2 running on the regional cluster, is most likely the setup we go, and everything talking between them. Is there a way on pre that we'll be able to validate our assumptions about network traffic and the fact that won't massively increase costs?
Not on pre. Staging would be the prime target to test that.
Yeah, and the hope is that the majority of traffic will be directly clients going to the buckets, right? Because this is where most traffic is happening, and it should stay like this. So registry 1 is proxying API requests to registry 2, but in the end it will return something back to the clients to download or upload images, right? And this will be a direct connection to the bucket. That should stay like this, I think. We should confirm this, but this is, I think, the majority of traffic.
Is this bit here, though, not going to be the concern? This buckets talking to each other?
I think this is the migration thing, right? This would be when, I assume that this is the thing when we start the migration, that the registry 1 would slowly start moving stuff over to the other bucket. So it's bucket to bucket transfer. I don't know how they implement this.
But these buckets have to sit in the clusters, won't they? So this bucket over here is on zonal cluster, and this bucket over here is on the regional cluster.
If we have multi-regional buckets, as we have as default, then it shouldn't matter, right?
Yeah, but we don't send the. So I'm quite sure that the registry streams out the content to the client. So as soon as you proxy things here in between, basically, yeah, exactly. So it really depends if registry
one, right?
Yeah. So because think about uploading something or downloading is the same, right? So you have a big body that you're either pushing to the cloud or downloading to the cloud. So in a regular configuration of a registry, basically assuming download, right? So the user asks for something, registry search this on the buckets, then basically downloads from the buckets and it streams the body as you receive it to the user. So you pay from your instance to the bucket, and then you have the egress cost to the user. Now you have another system on a side which may be proxied. So long term, everything will be proxied. So this means that also the body of the blob, basically, so the stream of data will cross from public to private, and this really depends on how we configure it. Because if we have an internal load balancer in between, we pay for it and we pay for traffic. And if we are moving from one cluster to another one, I think we pay as well, because we cross the border of the zone. So it's really
the question really is that we need to figure out is if the registry 1 always is streaming from the buckets, or if it's in some cases done by registry 2, which is streaming to registry 1, and this is streaming to the client. That would be
So I have a few clarification points. The way downloads work is you make the request to the registry, and the registry says, hey, I have your data. You could go find it here, and tells the client where to download it from object storage. So we don't see the egress traffic in our networks when a person downloads the information. Uploads operate in kind of a different fashion, where it goes to the registry and the registry will send it up to object storage on behalf of the user. So uploads are where the network costs are concerning, but because uploads happen far, far less than downloads happen, because downloads will happen, 5x more than uploads will, we're not really concerned about that. Joao already confirmed this in some issue somewhere where that precise question was asked. Amy, going back to where the buckets live, the buckets are separate from clusters. That separate entity, different configuration, different thing entirely. So we use multi-region buckets everywhere. We don't have to worry about the cost associated with where the network traffic is going to and from a bucket, because they're multi-region buckets, and that's handled inside of Google's internal network versus going out to the world and reaching an external endpoint to go reach back into a bucket.
Great. Okay, good stuff. Cool. Okay, so it sounds like from what we have so far, we can clarify with a few extra points, but from what we have so far, putting registry 2 on the regional cluster is low setup, shouldn't add any costs. We won't try and get canary working, so we don't have the extra complexity there.
That makes sense to me. The one thing I am curious about is, as registry 2 gets ramped up, let's say we've completed 1/3 of the migrations, should we consider, this is a long-term question that we handle, further down the road, should we consider migrating one of the zonal clusters into registry 2 or not. I would imagine because registry 1 continues to be a proxy, that's probably not possible, and that we'd have to wait until the migration is entirely considered complete at that point. But I don't think we've had a discussion as to what traffic at that point is going to start looking like.
How many metadata database we have? Because I think this will answer your question.
We don't have a metadata database right now.
We will have.
We will, yeah.
So the question is, there will be just one single, I'm not counting on replicas and things like that.
There will be a Patroni cluster.
Yeah, but it's still one. I mean, there's one data store, whatever it's replicated, whatever you have, but in the end, every registry instance will write on the same data store, right?
Yes.
So this means that when we do the rollout, we should do this all together. We can't do this partially, because think about this. So you roll out just one part of the cluster, and that thing starts serving version 2. Let's call it version 2, so registry 2. This means that those data have metadata now. And then if for some reason you reach another cluster that has no idea that there is a version 2 of it, how can it handle your requests?
You're correct. We'll have to wait until the migration is fully complete at that point before we can get rid of registry 1 then, which makes sense.
Because it goes into read-only mode. So actually there's a bit where it flips over, which is also we should probably think about. So eventually at the end of the migration, like sometime in the future, registry 2 takes over and registry 1 gets removed.
Yeah, but the question is how a registry 1 that has no registry 2 companion can see if in another cluster, the same information is already migrated.
Well, I think the process of migrating or removing registry 1, the replacement registry for that zone will include the necessary configuration so it knows to talk to the database. We just no longer proxy that traffic to a secondary registry instance at that point.
No, I think your point might be valid. Like, I think it depends on I think you're sort of asking like, how does registry know to move up to passover, right? Is that the question? So how does this registry know? So if you land on zone B and this goes, yep, I know that last time you hit this, it goes to regional, but you land on zone C, how does zone C know to go over? Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, especially if you migrate only one zone. So that zone C has no companion registry 2. So he thinks I'm the only source of truth for the registry.
But my understanding is that it's just a lookup in the bucket, right? You look in the bucket, do you have metadata for this? And if not,
that's the question. Then it's in the bucket.
And then I need to ask the other one. Yeah, that's especially the thing. We have all metadata in the buckets right now, and that's way too slow to be able to clean up not needed data anymore. That's why we need to move it to a database, because you can't search in the bucket efficiently enough we have millions of entries. And that's why we need to move it out, the metadata out of the bucket. So the data will still be there, but the metadata needs to move out into a real database. That's the whole thing.
Okay.
And so it's not about moving blobs. It's about moving the metadata describing the blobs, the metadata of the blobs, moving it out of the bucket for performance reasons. And I think there was some idea, I don't have the details here, but the idea was that there's some information in the blob telling you, okay, this is hosted here, or no, this has metadata on the other side, or it's not found here, so I need to ask there if it's there. And that's how it's working. And so I think moving over a different cluster over to be a registry 2 using the databases should be possible by I don't know, putting it into maintenance, switching the configuration to use the Postgres database, and then turning it on again. That's how I would envision it should work. But we really should have someone from the package team here, because they know all the details. We are just guessing all the time, right? So
yeah. My point is that you can't start migrating data until every installation of registry you have is a registry 2 companion.
Well, we won't we
Otherwise,
can't even add this database until we have the registry too, right? Because we'll have to have this instance first so that we have something to connect to this database. So yeah, there's definitely a phased rollout to a production.
We might need to use maintenance mode, and there was also some other configurations which I forgot the name about, disabling some file systems lookup or something like that. So I think they have some mechanisms built in to do this transition, but I'm not enough into the details. We really should talk with the package team here. But we should keep those in mind, yeah.
Yeah. So by maintenance mode, you mean that specific registry will just not serve information? So we can say zonal cluster, whatever, just go maintenance mode and all the traffic will be routed to the other. Okay.
Something like that, yeah.
In that case, it makes sense.
Cool.
But still, as soon as you do the first one that you put in the payers configuration, all the other one must be in maintenance mode, because you don't know where the requests can go, right? So it would be better if it's possible to say this is having both of them, but just both in read-only mode, right? Sorry, but registry to just in read-only mode. So we just say I can't handle this, so that you can first roll out everything, and then you can enable it. And then at that point, you can do what you proposed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And also, I'm assuming as we do deployments that it doesn't matter if these end up on different versions for a period of time, as they will, right? Depending on how we deploy this out, one of the two will be upgraded first. Cool. Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you. I'm putting together an issue which has these things laid out and sort of open questions. So I'll ping you all on that, and also share the longer write-ups that hopefully answer more of these questions, so we can move that forwards. But
Amy, it might be wise to send over this recording over to the package team, that way they could clarify anything for us if necessary.
yes, that's a good point. Yes, I'll do that. Super. Thanks very much, everyone. Is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about today? Cool. We clear on kind of what next steps we've got for API service? Cool. Nice. Good stuff. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the discussion here. And thanks for joining us, Mohammed. Take care. Bye.